All right, welcome back to another episode of Growth Marketers Podcast. I'm Samuel Timothy.
And I'm Taylor Rowe. What is content marketing? If you're a marketing veteran, a digital marketing veteran, you may already know what content marketing is. You may already understand it or feel like you understand it. And so today we wanted to take it back to the basics and really dive into and unpack everything about content marketing, who it's for, how you adapt content marketing at your organization, where you can start, the different types of content that can be created. Because sometimes we find ourselves as marketers in the weeds on some of these topics. We get a lot of feedback from customers and from listeners of the podcast that, again, we wanted to remind ourselves and remind you that this is an educational educational channel and educational podcast. And so sometimes we overlook some of the basics. So today we dove into content marketing and all aspects of how it might be related to your marketing strategy. And I think it's a good one. So let's dive right in and hope you enjoy.
So Taylor, I know we talk about several topics, on this show here. We have a lot of different, marketing related, marketing technology, marketing concept, tactics that we talk about. There's something that we often bring up in our conversations, which is content marketing. When you go Google search content marketing, there's a lot of different ways people define it. There's a lot of confusion around this whole methodology of content marketing, especially getting confused with inbound marketing or SEO and things of that nature. So we want to get to the basics of it today. We want to kind of define what it is, what type of content should you be creating, where do you go publish such content, and how do you get eyeballs to consume that content, all of such things that we want to cover today.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, let's start by just kind of defining what content marketing is. Like you said, we really talk about it all the time because, in my opinion, today content marketing is marketing, right? It's kind of synonymous. And when you talk about, digital marketing, again, there's really no digital marketing. It's just marketing. Gone are the days of marketing or, primarily really advertising being all about, a headline or, a tag, catchphrase, something along those lines that you would see, maybe in a magazine, full page article or maybe a billboard or something along those lines, right? Now, in the information and the data, age that we do live in, as we always talk about, there's a surplus of content, there's a surplus of information. So the onus really, comes and becomes focused on the actual content and the value of content. So if I were to kind of define content marketing, I would really just say educational content creation and distribution, with the intention of educating your potential audience, right? And so if you look at what our job is as a marketer in the marketing department, it's really to educate and inspire your market, your addressable market, to want to work with you. So if you look at that, you just kind of have to answer the simple question of how do I get everyone within my addressable market to know who we are and understand what we do and how we accomplish that. The answer to that big question, right, is content marketing. We do that through content marketing, which means we are creating content that's educational, that's educating and adding value to our audience, and distributing it to them in a format, in a channel that is relevant and easy for them to comprehend and understand and ultimately to consume.
Yeah, I think the key is really education. And I think if you don't make that your focus and priority, and if your objective and goal is to get everyone that ever consumes anything that you put out is to become a prospect or a sale, you'll probably be very quickly disappointed and you might give up way too soon as well. Because this is not an easy journey.
Absolutely. So one of the things I think that we should kind of break down for our audience is the different types of content that you could create. So it's easy to say, okay, well, I understand you need to create content. So Sam, what are the different types of content? Are we just talking about written content, blog posts here, or how can we actually create content in different various formats?
Yeah, I think we're living in a day and age, right, where there's so many different type and formats of content that you can produce. I think if it was, maybe 10, 12 years ago, majority of the energy probably would have been spent on just written content because people are either reading books or they were reading blogs, right? That's just how they were consuming. But now that I think you have so many different types of content types you can create, right, which you have videos. Essentially, that's another form of content, and you can create educational video content that can be provided on your website, or it could be used on YouTube or any other video hosting platform. And then you can also have just visual content. These could be just static graphics, whether it be in the form of infographics or things of that nature. And then you can also have basically ebooks and white papers and other sort of resources that you can make available. So I would say a written video and audio being podcast, right? And then obviously any other formats that you can convert them into, whether it be short form videos or static images or text and things like that for social post. Mm-hmm. So the primary mediums being the video, written, audio, and visual.
Right. Yeah, and I think in determining what type of content you need to create, I think maybe that's even the wrong question. The first question needs to be, what topic are we trying to create content around? And then what's going to be the most efficient way or effective way to articulate that topic, right? And ultimately distribute that content or that topic. So the next thing we want to talk about is, how do you decide what topics to create content around? And so the simple answer to this is you create content around questions that your prospects or your customers would have in, of course, relation to your product or service that you have to offer. So what we do, and we talk a lot about content marketing and buyer's journey, what we do is kind of break down and segment the buyer's journey, if you will, into three segments. There's more ways you can break it down, but if you're just getting into this, the three main areas that you could look at is what we call top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, and bottom of the funnel. Or you could look at it as awareness stage, where somebody is just becoming aware of either a problem or a solution. They're researching around a lot of topics, how-tos, trying to solve problems, right? They're trying to answer questions that they have internally. Middle of the funnel would be that consideration phase. So what alternatives are they considering? What are their options, basically? When somebody's weighing options to work with you to do something internally, what options do they have? Is it a materials question? Is it a process question? You know your industry and you know what that consideration phase might look like. And then the actual bottom of the funnel would be the decision-making phase. So once they've, let's say decided, your customer has decided that they need help with something and they're going to hire somebody to help them. And if you have the answer to that, how do we actually create content that's aligned with that decision-making phase? So when you start breaking down the purpose of the content, then you can look at the topics that you need to address and then figure out what's the best format of that. So some topics, you can look at it in theory, and this is just a blanket statement, but video content, for example, is probably best suited for, let's say, in terms of educational content, I would say video content is best suited for top of the funnel or middle of the funnel, awareness and consideration, because you're maybe teaching or you're educating around topics and trying to illuminate a problem that maybe they didn't know that they had. Or you're trying to give answers to complex and nuanced situations and problems that a potential customer may have. Now, you could look at that and say, well, bottom of the funnel, decision-making stage, maybe I would want a video around a case study or a testimonial, something like that, right? So it's not necessarily that there's one piece of content for one stage of the funnel. It's that you have to adapt that particular topic based on what's going to be the most powerful or what's going to be the most effective. So, that case study or testimonial example, right? You could put a headshot. I'm sure you've seen this on a million websites, a headshot of a customer with a little quick text that says, working with this company helped me reduce, wasted spend by X% and, increase my bottom line by X%. Okay, great. But seeing that person on video and hearing the powerful testimony that they have of working with your company may have a bigger impact on your potential customer and may just tip the scales in your favor when it comes to that decision-making phase. So again, you could apply that to every piece of content that you're creating. Look at the topic, look at the questions or the the purpose of what you're trying to create the content for, and then determine what's going to be the most effective way to create that content in terms of format. And it may not be just one answer, right? And the answer may be that you want to have written content, visual content, audio, video, all around the same topic, because the answer is that your customers consume content in a variety of different ways, and we want to make it as easy as possible for them to consume that content.
Yeah, and I think one other consideration I would probably have is, your internal resources and your personality type as well, right? Like some people probably are very good in articulating their ideas on a video, and some people are probably better off, just setting apart 4 hours, sit down and think through and what they want to say, and then they want to write that down in a form of a long form blog or some sort of a content. So, and also if you have internal research that can actually convert these videos and edit them and make them more professionally done, then you may want to focus on the video as a primary medium, and then having someone else that can transcribe it or turn those into blog posts as well. We've seen that happening with webinars that are converted into a blog post and then can be leveraged into multiple smaller pieces and things of that nature. So if you have the resources to create the videos, then obviously do that. But if your personality just more of not a camera person, but wants to sit down and just write the topic, maybe then you probably want to focus that as your primary content type.
Absolutely. So in terms of, other considerations that need to be made, right? So we look at, what is content marketing? What are the different types of content you can create? How do you determine the content? Well, what's the logical next step is, how do we get visibility, right? How do we get eyeballs on this content? How do we distribute or promote that content? So, Samuel, what are some different ways that, if we're spending all this time and effort to create content, written content, video content, the content arbitrage, if you will, that you just described, of creating a podcast, chopping it up into pieces, promoting, having video out there and then having a blog post. Ultimately, how do we get people to see that content?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to, a couple of different things. So if you have a pretty substantial email subscriber base, then maybe if you're writing blogs or creating videos or creating podcasts, leveraging your email subscriber base as a means to get that content in front of them might be a much quicker way to do, because that way they're an engaged audience, they're consuming your information, they already value your thought leadership, and they might be much more willing to consume that content from an email standpoint. So leveraging your email platform might be one way to do that. The second one is obviously just optimizing it for organic visibility. So if, especially a blog, making sure that you did use, like you said, right, where writing answers to the questions that your people are asking. So making sure that you're using those questions as your titles, as your subheadings, and you're also answering those questions with the proper keywords, and making sure that those pages that are properly optimized for search could easily get those blog posts to be found. And then if especially our videos, making sure those are not just hosted on like somewhere like Vimeo, where people are not as actively engaging in content consumption. Whereas if you put it on YouTube and optimize it for the questions that people asked, make that to be the title, have real nice video descriptions, have hashtags, and have some other resources that you can use to get them off of YouTube. And if you can properly structure your YouTube videos with those questions as your primary heading, then you can leverage YouTube channels and YouTube's own search engine's power to get those content pieces published. And last but not least is any other form of distribution channel, right? Because this is where a lot of people get hung up on, what should I post on social media? But this is where you take your anchor content and then redistribute them in whatever length you can possibly distribute them in, whether it be Instagram as Instagram stories or reels, or YouTube shorts, or even other LinkedIn platform or Twitter or any of those platforms. Just reposting the same content in different times of the day or different throughout the entire life of that product, life of that content. Mm-hmm. So those are some simple, organic way I would recommend to get the biggest reach, and that's just the free ways to do. Then obviously there's paid options.
Yeah, and just to kind of touch on some of those paid options, similar channels, right? The answer that you're looking for is really, hey, where are my clients? Wherever my clients are, that's where I need to be. And whether you accomplish that from an organic perspective or a paid perspective, there's a number of variables that would impact that decision. But pretty much the same channels allow for paid promotion, right? So Google search, as an example you just described, Google Ads is probably the fastest way to start getting some visibility or traffic to that content you're creating by running some ads there. Social media, same thing. You can promote your content. YouTube, those videos you're creating, you can promote content. You can run ads for pretty much anything, even if you wanted to promote a podcast, right? So those are great places. Even industry publications, through Google Display Network or through direct partnerships and paid media placements on industry directories. Lists and listicles, as you'll see a lot of those searches. When people search for best whatever company, there's a lot of directories and review sites and that offer paid promotion as well. So the answer is really, where are your customers? Really, if we look back at it again to defining what is content marketing, it's educational content creation and distribution. So how do you do that? Well, who are your customers? What questions do they have around your product or service? And in relation to how you solve a problem that they have and what kind of impact that would have on their business. How can you answer their questions? How can you educate them? How can you build some sort of brand affinity towards in thought leadership towards your brand? And then ultimately, where are they consuming information? So if you start creating content that has an arrow through all 3 or 4 of those considerations, I think you're going to take a huge step in your marketing strategy.
So the question that I would have is someone who hasn't done this before and they don't have an audience, they don't have an email list, and they haven't produced any content. And what type of a ramp up time do they need to expect in terms of creating enough content pieces that can actually start to produce some sort of a positive ROI?
Yeah, it's going to depend, right? Time or money is really what it comes down to. If we have money in terms of budget to either hire people internally or hire external help to help create content, the faster we can create content, the better chance that we're going to have to succeed in a shorter amount of time, because we've heard this idea of fail fast, right? So you quickly figure out what you're good at, what you're not good at. You talked about it depends on personality types. Well, we have a wider variety of personality types and skill sets to create multiple variations of content. And if we can pump out content in faster iterations, we can find out what doesn't work faster, which means we can get to the right answer quicker. That if we have budget to hire people, hire external resources to create content, promote content, it could be a shorter time frame, but it's still relatively long-term strategy. And on the flip side of that is, if we don't, and all we have is just the knowledge that we have in our head, right, and our effort, all we have is time, not necessarily budget, then it might take longer. But again, in those scenarios, your focus needs to be on creating the most high value piece of content that you can, right? Because you need to differentiate yourself somehow, and if you can't pump out a ton of content to keep up with your competitors, you have to create something that's wildly unique that your competitors don't have the ability to create, right? And I've seen this with companies, their CEO or their lead engineer or whoever that may be is the one creating the content, versus another company who's pumping out 12 blog posts a month, but that's written by lower level copywriters or interns at a company. So they might be able to pump out a bunch of content and do as much as they can in terms of tricks of the trade with Google to get some visibility, and they have budget to promote the content, so they're able to get in front of visibility or in front of more people. But that content's coming directly from the CEO that's starting a conversation on LinkedIn and building a community, for example. That content is more valuable. The people that are watching, consuming, and listening to that content are closer to that buying cycle because they're decision makers themselves. So you just have to understand, what can you do? What is your competitive advantage, and what makes you unique? So, timing is a question, but it's also a factor of budget and resources.
The next question that I would ask is, if there might be team members in the organization that are in the marketing function that values the importance of content marketing and understand that it is a time required strategy or technique, but then your leadership may not have bought into this whole idea and they are more on speed and results fast, right? Mm-hmm. So how do you empower a marketing person to educate the leadership on the importance of content marketing, and how do you buy the time needed to see success?
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question because it is 100% necessary to be successful. You need internal buy-in and you need top-down buy-in to invest in the content marketing, because it's completely different than what typically sales-led organizations are used to, in terms of well, how many leads are we generating from X, Y, or Z, or everything is around cold calling and outbound and relationship based, which is fine. It's just a different model. So if you say, hey, we're going to spend 3 months dedicated to posting content on LinkedIn, and after 3 months they look at that and they say, this is what you made me buy this camera equipment, this is how much we invested in these tools and technology, this is the salary of the person creating the content, after 3 months, and I have zero ROI, and if that's the question they're going to ask, yeah, I mean, you might be fired in 3 months. So you need to all be on the same page from the beginning to say, hey, and obviously do research and say, here's what I've seen successful, here's what successful companies have done, here's in general how long it's taken to be successful. And if you believe that the motion that you're making, right, if you believe that the activities that you're participating in are the right activities and will accomplish the desired outcome, then when something doesn't work, the question is just, what do we need to do to make it work? Not well, let's scrap this whole thing because content marketing doesn't work for me, right? And we use the analogy all the time. And if you're listening to this podcast more than five times, you may have heard us give an analogy towards the fitness space. But to me, it's a very direct parallel in the sense of, it's been proven that we know eating healthy and working out will lead to the more desired outcome that you're looking for, being leaner, losing weight, gaining muscle. Like, we know that scientifically, we know that, and you've seen products or results of that. The problem is, in this space, in the business world, in the marketing world, a lot of companies are still in denial that marketing will work for them, right? And it's akin to saying, well, working out doesn't work for me because of X, Y, and Z. Like, we know those are all excuses. And so you wouldn't say, hey, going to the gym doesn't work for me. You would try everything in the book, right? Well, this diet doesn't work for me. What I need, we know everyone's body is different, so we know that different types of exercises react different. We know everyone's, physiology is different, their DNA is different. So you're just consistently trying to iterate and improve to find the right mixture and right answer, and that's what we need to do as marketers versus, well, I created a video and it didn't get me any customers, so video doesn't work for me. Well, is that the right topic? Is that the right promotion? Is that the right, audience? So there's so many different variables, and that's just one channel, right? So, or one format of content. So there's so many things that need to be tested and improved on. So you do need the right internal culture of everyone is seeking for the right solution, not necessarily, okay, I'll give you a test here, but this is a very short leash, and if we don't accomplish, 100%, whatever ROI, we're going to cut this whole department, right? And unfortunately, we see that a lot in the marketing space, even in today's day and age where everything is so digital and so data driven. We still see a lot of that. So if your company's in denial that digital or content marketing is the right way to go, I would say you might be in the wrong organization to be able to implement these type of things.
So obviously, when you talked about ROI, it's usually what they refer to as ROI is the lag measures, which is usually sales, right? There's leading indicators that what you're doing is going in the right direction. So what are some leading indicators that you can be looking at whether to verify if your content marketing strategy is doing what it's supposed to do, or at least heading in the right direction? And what are the lag measures that someone should be focused on to see, well, did we get the real outcome that we expected?
Yeah, I'll work backwards from the lag measures, right? Which is ultimately is revenue, or maybe one step back would be like marketing source pipeline, right? Because as marketers, when we're talking about content marketing, that's really all we can hope for, is that we are sourcing leads that are actually active in the pipeline, meaning they're getting to a proposal stage, right? Like, we can't necessarily upfront control whether or not those deals are closing. There's a lot of other variables that come into play, but we know we're on the right track if, every month we could look at the pipeline and say, hey, 60% of these leads are marketing sourced, right? Like, that's a good relationship to have with the sales department. Now, leading indicators to get to that point, it's going to be different for each channel, right? If you talk about content marketing in the sense of traditional, I say traditional, but it's, traditional SEO and content for search engines, right? Content for Google. You could easily look at things like keyword rankings. You could look at impressions in Google Search Console, those type of things. You could look at traffic to page, and I would also to those pages around those topics. And I would I never look at a number and just say, hey, that's the end all be all, right? A lot of people look at a bounce rate or traffic and say that's the goal, is like to lower our bounce rate or increase our traffic. To me, quality over quantity is really what drives results. So look at the intent of that traffic, right? So based on the topics that you're trying to drive traffic around, are we getting people to the websites? Like, who are those people that are coming to the website? And the same thing goes with videos that we're creating, right? If we're starting conversations or sharing things on LinkedIn, who are the people that are actually interacting with our content? If we're doing training and webinars and seminars, who are the type of people that show up to that? Who are the type of people that are engaging with us and consuming our content? And if you don't have the hard data to say, who these people actually are, you can look at it and say, well, what is the topic that we're writing about, right? Or that we're creating content about? If we're creating a very technical piece of, into the weeds style video content that's explaining something, and only 100 people viewed that piece of content, let's just say, we could probably assume that those 100 people are very, very relevant, because someone wouldn't just be consuming that piece of content if it's very, very specific to the audience that we're trying to get in front of. So to me, the leading indicators when it comes to content marketing need to be in line with the intent of the piece of content or the topic. But there's no real one metric that you can look at, and a lot of companies, a lot of organizations are looking for one, because it's easy to say, like, well, how do we measure success? What is the one thing that we want to measure? Yes, that is revenue, like marketing source pipeline, as I mentioned, but like you said, it could be 6, 8, 12, 24, who knows how many months before we start seeing that revenue in a way that's making a difference or an impact at the organization.
So if you had, to start from scratch and you're a brand new company, you have the buy-in from the leadership, they understand the importance of content marketing, but they've never done anything before. What would the first 30 days and what channel would you choose and run with?
I think, what we're doing right now is the easiest way. I mean, I think what you need to do is have conversations with salespeople and conversations with customers. And document those conversations, right? Whether you're doing that in real time or whether you're doing that post-conversation, or you have a conversation with a customer, take their feedback, take their questions, go do some research, and then create that piece of content. But that's really the best way. I mean, we live in a day and age that, we're producing a relatively, high production podcast with very, very minimal expense and investment, right? There's free software out there. There's free video editing software. You can distribute, this type of audio and visual content to platforms for free as well, to every platform, all the main platforms, and Spotify, YouTube, anywhere where people consume information. So I think it's probably the easiest way to create raw content and then expand upon that and chop it up and use it for many different things, right? So again, quality over quantity in metrics in terms of measuring visibility, but also quality over quantity in terms of the type of content. So you can spend, not that you need to, but you could spend 30 hours researching and putting together an outline and, really creating a piece of content that is going to add value. And understand, like, you could say, okay, that only turned into one video, but now you chop that up and it could turn into 30 different pieces of content that you could then leverage for every single channel that you have. So for me right now, as we sit here today, this is the best way to create content. I don't know if this is always going to be the best way to create content, but I think it's the easiest it's ever been to create content.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what you opened with. Basically, we're in a content surplus generation, so there's only going to be more of it. So I think you don't have an option but create more. And create more and niche down even more. And you can't be a generalist. You have to be even more specific.
Yeah, and you can be creative. I mean, that's the thing, is like there's more content than ever, but there's also more people consuming content than ever, right? It's more accessible than it's ever been. You talk about, being able to advertise or create content And you don't have to. It's not a. You don't have to run an ad on TV, right? An ad on the Super Bowl is like there are millions and millions of people every day on YouTube, or billions of people, and there's billions of searches happening on Google. So there's so much content created, but there's so much content being consumed that if you look at your niche and what type of content you want to create, and you get a little, just a little creative with your angle and how you want to create that content, and then, like I said before, focus on that, speed to production so that you can test and iterate and improve very quickly. I think you can make a huge difference and huge impact. All right. Well, hopefully you guys enjoyed the topic here. Again, we wanted to go back to the basics and just look at, what is content marketing and how do we start creating content for our organization. So if you have questions or you're looking for assistance with content marketing for your company, please reach out to us. If you enjoyed the podcast, please give us a like, subscribe, wherever you're listening, share it with a friend or a colleague, and of course, tune in next week for a new episode.
Growth Marketers is brought to you by One IMS, helping you reach new heights through integrated marketing. One world, one web, one IMS.